I'm delighted to introduce our next speakers from the city of Canterbury, Bankstown in New South Wales, Australia. Anston Ratnayake has been passionate about community engagement through his working career. He is a communication and stakeholder engagement professional with proven experience in community consultation, media management and government relations, formerly manager of tertiary education at Frank Education and criminology tutor at WSU. Anston works for Canterbury Bankstown Council as a community engagement officer, working across a number of thought-provoking projects. Somphors Vorn has been working with the digital industry for over 15 years with a background in web design, digital production within media and advertising industry. She's now utilising that experience to innovate at Canterbury Bankstown, and we're going to talk about that shortly. Working at Canterbury Bankstown's Creative Engagement Officer, she specialises in digital engagement and managing the council's Have Your Say website, supporting traditional engagement methods together with digital technologies. Welcome, Anston, and welcome, Somphors. I'm going to hand over the mic to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Cindy. We're really honoured to be part of this conference. Basically, the last 12 years has been a very challenging time to be in the engagement space, but we've been really thankful to have access to the HiVE as our engagement platform. It's really helped us to navigate and propel our digital engagement forward during these tough times. Let me just share my screen. Yep, you've got it.
Perfect.
All right, great. So as Cindy had mentioned, I'm Sompa, and we also have Anston, and we're in the community engagement team at Canterbury Bankstown Council. So we've migrated to the HiVE for about over a year now, and we've seen some amazing results. In just over a year, we saw a monthly increase of by 160%, and our membership actually increased by 100%. So you can see that in that year, it's skyrocketed. And I think that's because the tools available has enabled us to take our projects to a higher level and increase the interest in our engaged community. However, it was also during this year that COVID hit, and it did cause a lot of challenges that we had to navigate. And I'll let Anston go through that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Sompa. So COVID challenges, I'm sure we all had various COVID challenges, and us being our council, our LGA being one of the largest area councils in New South Wales, with a population of nearly 400,000, stretching from we have about 35 different nationalities across our LGA. We struggled in the beginning because when the whole COVID happened and we had to go from all our face-to-face engagement, because that's what we really valued, and to digital, we didn't really stop. Because we had the HiVE, and it being such an amazing platform, we were able to continue with our engagement without putting a full stop to it. But when I thought about some of the challenges that we had during this time, I just put a few job points down. One of the first ones, which was very important to me as an engagement officer, was collating the right information about groups you're in contact with. Now, as placemakers, we need to ensure equitable participation, and this can only be done through figuring out our LGAs or our specific areas, age, class, gender, issues and concerns of various cultural groups, language and communication, but also about existing power dynamics. Now, this deep knowledge was, for us, we were able to dive into, was because the HiVE helped us look into all these various projects that we had worked with before and be able to pull up information that was relevant for those specific areas and projects. And obviously that was done through observation, ethnographic research, but above all, listening to your community, which I think is very important. And then it was communication channels, literacy and understanding, which is sort of goes in hand. Now, as a big council, our role as engagement officers was to establish two-way channels for our community and public information sharing and feedback collection. We considered various hotlines, text and talk, which our client services took on amazingly. Responsive social media. We were very responsive on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We were always on it, making sure any comments that came through were answered right away and sent off to the right department within our council. But one of the biggest things we didn't think right away, but it tapped on to us about, I would say, March, April, was getting into local radio stations, especially around stations that catered to minority populations, could be Bengali, Hindi, Tagalog in the Philippines. And that was our best way of getting in touch with communities who were not, I wouldn't say not even literate, but whose first language wasn't English, and they had 3 or 4 different languages, and English wasn't a priority. So we established these things, but also on the HiVE, a tool that I really liked was us being able to use Google Translate. So we could go out to the community and tell them, hey, go on to our engagement site, have your say, have a look, but also be able to translate it into your own language. So that way we still establish that communication channel and not missing out on that. Then reaching hard to reach communities. I think as placemakers, keeping a promise and being able to build trust is at our disposal. And I think it's very important. And communities, especially like our Indigenous community here in Australia, that were wronged over the years by urban planners, designers, developers, and policymakers, are very crucial to us and our migrant population as well. So for us, we spent a lot of time preparing local messages that were based on community questions and concerns, and pre-testing them through various participating processes on our HiVE, on our Have Your Say run through HiVE. And specifically targeting key stakeholders and at-risk groups. Now, we identified community groups that we could really tap into, and they were sort of the first point of contact with these communities. Could be religious leaders, community leaders, health workers, volunteers, and they were our go-to people during COVID. So if we weren't able to reach the community directly, whether it be because they didn't have access to the internet, access to a proper community center to go to, we got in touch with them because they would get in touch with their people, and they could get them together if need be in COVID safe spaces and be able to talk to them about these projects. So we had to use them as our base. But last but not the least, staying connected. Now, I feel most community engagement projects, the only reason that they're successful are because if they look at it as an ongoing process instead of just ticking a box and being like, okay, we've done engagement and so be it. Now with the HiVE and with Somphors as one of our great digital engagement officers, we were always able to close the loop. Now, when I talk about closing the loop, I mean, you have a project, you initiate it with the community, but when you're wrapping it up, you talk to them about what the phases were, what their feedback was going to be used for, and going forward, how would we engage them again? So you didn't leave them, in a loop thinking, oh, what happened to our comments and feedback? Like, is it going to be incorporated? Are they going to talk to us again? And as you wrap that up, you make them feel as empowered, but also making them feel part of your LGN community. So I think that was our challenges, and I think the HiVE just helped us get through them. So I'll pass it on to Sompa to continue with the approaches.
Yep. So our approach to digital engagement, basically as an organisation at council, our vision is to be a leading organisation that collaborates and innovates. And innovates is one of the key things that is forefront to everything that we do as in digital engagement. So we want to implement ideas and ways of doing things that are new, different, and better than what was done before. In my creative engagement role, I've always seen myself as a bit of a creative problem solver. So when we're working with our stakeholders, I try to find different solutions, digital solutions to achieve desired engagement outcomes. General philosophy is basically innovation is experimentation. So when I first started, there was no prior role, there was no precedent set. And so I was given permission to fail. That I was told permission to fail, which for me, it meant I had the freedom to experiment, try new tools, try new methods and see what worked, what didn't work. This required a lot of researching and looking at different tools and the capabilities, testing and prototyping, doing a lot of trial and error to see, you know, what works and what doesn't. If it works, we'll continue on with it. If not, you know, fail fast, continue moving forward. And by doing this, you know, we gain our learnings and we continue to improve. So when we're looking at a project, there are two considerations. Basically, feedback. So first we consider what kind of feedback we are looking to collect. And this will determine the type of participation tools we will use. So we ask a few questions like, you know, whether we know if we want the community supports the plan, or do we want them to just contribute to its development? How open do we want the submissions to be to the public? Is it open to everyone, or is it only just towards a target audience? And are there inbuilt tools available on the platform to achieve our outcomes, or do we need to look for external tools that we could look into integrating? We're thankful that the HiVE has so many different participation and content tools available, but there are times when we look to do something different, so we'll try to find that tool that will enable us to embed it and integrate it. The other consideration is communication. So what kind of information do we want to communicate about the project? What kind of content and assets do we have available to work with? Will this information go on the page, and this will determine how it would look and how we may lay it out? We especially focused on usability as a user experience principle. So we want to make the information clear, easy to navigate, and visually appealing. From an online point of view, engagement relates to the online metrics of traction, you know, how engaged the users are to the page. So we kind of follow the idea that, you know, if a page is attractive, users will read and learn more about the project and become more invested and have more buy-in. And I'll pass it to Anston to go through some of the projects that we've gone through.
Great, thanks, Somphors. So I've used two of our case studies over here today, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, which actually excelled last year, and it happened. So we went into lockdown about the third week of March, and both these projects were part of our face-to-face engagement. We didn't really stop. We went right into digital engagement, and we had to come with a plan in about 2 weeks, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But before we start off with that bit, placemaking. So we love placemaking processes as it is flexible and an approach that is driven by community. It is not just about creating spaces that is based on quality, but also about spaces that are equitable. It challenges issues of equity while evolving and making spaces inclusive. From a digital content perspective, they make great projects online, as they usually come with beautiful illustrations and assets that we can work with. Now, I always tend to ask, but who is the community anyways? How do we ensure that the community voices not only get heard once, but continue to be felt in public space as it evolves? And also, what do we do when some of these voices are overpowered or are in conflict with others? Now, I think, as I've mentioned with the two projects as well, a perfect example of placemaking would be around public spaces. Now, the work of making our public spaces more open and fair is generally a bit hard for us as placemakers. But I always say, never trust someone, especially a community engagement person, if they say they have the answers to all the questions, because I personally think we don't. Community engagement is such an area where you sort of mold into your community and figure it out as you go with experiences that you've built on from previous projects. But when it comes to equity and inclusion, we as placemakers should always strive to keep learning. I think that's very important, both for many skilled people who already work with local communities, but also incorporating traditional planning processes. And who are our experts, you would ask? I personally think our community members are the experts, not us. So as effective placemaking processes engages these experts, I think it's very important from the beginning to set the priorities and visions for projects. And I'll show you with Parry Park and Greenacre Splash Park, that's what we did. And that takes it through implementation and beyond till the completion of the project. So we'll just jump onto Parry Park. So just to give you a little bit of background about Parry Park Play Space. So Parry Park was located, or is located, in Lakemba. Lakemba is one of our most diverse town centres in the LGA in New South Wales. And it's been constructed to cater to a very growing population, and it's a very rapidly growing population, which attracts a lot of migrants. Now, within Parry Park, which is quite a large space, exists the Parry Park Play Space, which through previous engagement that we had done before COVID hit, the community told us that they would like the space to be very family friendly, so they can go out for picnics and, you know, be able to sit and use tables, but also help them provide their children experiences, play experiences, and have chill out zone for teenage kids and adults as well, and have for younger kids like a water play and sand area, and provide bike paths and kick around areas, but also essentially making sure it was free, that was safe for all users, because it wasn't a very high densely populated area. But they also wanted to make sure when they went there, it was a very easy space to use. Now, we had planned this out perfectly with face-to-face engagement, and then, you know, COVID came around. So we, on the HiVE, just jumping on the next slide, something. So on the HiVE, we used specific tools, but my approach to this was I wanted to have an experience for the community in the same way that we would have had in person. So we thought of something out of the box, and we'll show it to you in a sec, but we had 4 particular areas, which is the kids zone, where we used our Outgrow tool, the parent zone, which is the HiVE hotspot tool, the survey tool, and the question and answer tool. Spend Your Points, which was the funded tool, and the before and after, where you talk about placemaking and, you know, very beautiful illustrative pictures, was our swipe tool. So if you could just jump onto our Have Your Say page. Could we blow up the screen somehow?
Oh, it's not showing, sorry.
No, I think it's a bit too small.
Share.
I think if you maximize it, probably. Yeah, great. Does it look sort of clear for everyone? So over here, obviously we had the background information and the kids zone. Now the kids zone was something that got me very excited, and I wanted to replicate what we were doing face to face. So over here, because it's past our engagement now, it does a very quick run through. But what essentially happened, even though it was called the kids zone, even adults could take part, and it was broken into ages and gender. But what people would do is we would ask questions like, you know, what do you enjoy more, like climbing trees, water play, what sort of play equipment do you like? Or then we would have questions like, you know, would you like to go to a park and relax, or read a book, or, you know, chill out with your friends? And at the end of the quiz, it would literally tell you what sort of Parry Park play space you are. So they would be like, you're a superhero Parry Park play space, or you're a mermaid Parry Park play space. That way, kids were able to relate to a specific Disney character or a cartoon character that they knew growing up. And that was one of the best. So we had about nearly 75 people do the kids zone. So this was mainly done because we wanted to have kids do it, but also for families to get together. So parents with their kids being stuck at home during COVID, do a fun activity together online. So that's what Kids Zone was about. And then just go back again. So obviously we have the spend your points. Now with spend your points, what we did was we had specific areas within this park. Over here, you can see it's actually a big park, but there was a little play space area. And we as council did not want to allocate all play equipment. So what we did was we gave everyone, let's say 1 point or 10 points according to the space within the park. So it could have been hillside and climbing play. We would put, let's say, 3 equipment in by the council, but then they had an option of choosing the green spot. Sorry, just on the top again, Sampa, for a second. You screen scroll up. Yeah, so the green spot was available for community members to choose. So they could spend their 1 point by choosing which play equipment they wanted. So all they had to do was scroll down and then allocate that 1 point into climbing ropes, climbing cleats, or hiding holes. And all they had to do was support. So back of house, we were able to see, okay, we had, 10 supports for climbing cleats and 0 supports for either. And that way it was easy for us to allocate the play equipment. So that was our spend your points. And then we all had various areas like sand and water play options, children's cycle play options. So this we would have done in person by them putting tokens in, but with the HiVE, we were able to use the tool just to replicate that in a more interactive way. Then obviously before and after images were, I think over here as community engagement officers, or if you're working with community, you need to make sure that the renders are really good. What I made sure was that when they swiped back and forth, they were able to identify structures, whether it be buildings, whether it be flora and fauna that they could identify and be like, oh, wait, this is a space that I know, and that's what they're going to do with it in the future. So they were able to relate and foresee a space that they would be in. So I made sure the trees at the back over there could still be seen at the back, so they weren't taken away. So that way people were able to relate to it. So that was our before and after. So I think if you slide that as well, yeah, you can still see the trees at the back over there. So little details that I picked up with working with community before, and they were very specific about, and I was like, you know what, we'll give it to them because that's what they want, and they're the one we're building this for. So just jumping back now to Green Acre. So Greenacre Splash Park. So this exciting play space was designed as a high quality, free play space within a lower socioeconomic area. It was designed to accommodate every member and all abilities within our diverse community. The concept designs are developed by award-winning place design group who have incorporated the narrative of Tiddalik the Frog. Now, Tiddalik the Frog is actually a Dreamtime story for our non-Australians here that our Indigenous communities use. That they talk about their stories in Dreamtime stories. That's how they pass on stories down to different generations. And we incorporated that into the layout of the space. Now, the themes of diversity, collaboration, and laughter are carried through to the next stage of engagement and are the principal themes of the park within a range of flora and fauna representing these ideas in the space. The users filling each area with laughter, connection, and community. Now, with Greenacre Splash Park, we'll just jump onto the tools, Sampa, please. We used Image Gallery as a mood board, hotspot tool, swipe tool, the video media to illustrate the story and concept of the design, as well as include the webinar recording, visual survey with ratings against imagery, and issue to create an interactive PDF to easily view the concept plan documents. Now our Sampa jumps onto the page. Over here, we actually took a very different approach to Parry Park. Now, with Parry Park, we gave them all these amazing illustrations, and we also made them interact a lot more. Over here, what we did is we reduced the interaction, and we gave them a lot of information to look and absorb and be part of the placemaking process. And we simply then asked them to rate the concept design and take a look at the webinar. So watch the webinar for more information and put through formal submissions. So they could just send us saying they support the plan or they don't support the plan and give us a reason to why they did not support it. And the only reason we went around with this was to reduce the community fatigue. Now, especially during COVID, you need to realize, yes, engagement on digital is a great tool, but your community is being bombarded with different variations of projects. So if you keep putting out 10 projects where they have to go through all these different concept designs, interact, download different documents, and then send in submissions, you probably might not even get the result you really want, like a true result, because they're fatigued with all this information. So what we did with all our various projects, we took various approaches. So maybe one project, we gave them a lot of information and with less interaction. And then another project, we did a mixture of it. So we did a webinar, we embedded it onto our Have Your Say page, which was amazing. We gave them, the concept master plan, orbs to show what the spaces would look like, and then a simple formal submission of if they support or don't support. And another really good thing, which I think with community engagement, is if you have 2,000 people going past your site and they don't actually engage and tell you, oh, we like it or we don't like it, that's okay, because I feel like if you have 2,000 people looking at the project and having no comment, they're happy with it. They don't have to always be like, oh, I like it or I don't like it. So if you do see numbers on the HiVE and it says you've had 2,000 people go past, but only 65 interacted, don't fret about it. Be happy, because the remaining, odd 100 people are actually happy with the project. They don't have any issues with the concept design. And that's another different approach we had to take with our thinking and perception about various projects. So that was the 2 case studies. Please feel free to ask me questions around it, and I'll just pass it on to Sompa to close it off.
Yep. Did we have any questions?
I think there's one that has come through. It's about your title, Somphors, and I suppose the fact that you guys talk about creativity, innovation, failing fast. These are concepts that we don't hear spoken about in council. What is it that's driving that kind of approach at Canterbury Bankstown?
I think it was just because our vision is to be collaborative and innovative. It is a value that our council holds dear. So with that permission, it has given us ability to just trial. So it means that I haven't really been at, I don't have to worry about holding back and seeing whether or not, if I fail, it's fine. It's just something that we get to learn from.
Yeah. 100%, because I think part of engagement is learning from processes. Not all processes work for all communities. Now, you can't use a process for, let's say, a very Anglo-based community and use the same approach with your migrant community. You'll get completely different responses. You have to be able to adhere to different, boundaries, how you engage with them as well. And I think with HiVE, with the different tools, for example, the Visioner tool, we were able to use with migrant communities, just get ideas on board. They could put as simple as, we like to see more fun spaces. We like to see more water spaces, or we like to see areas for women. Just so that now then, that being up there as a Visioner tool, other members within the community sees, okay, these ideas are spoken about. What else can I think about? You can't get a migrant community who probably speaks 2 or 3 different languages to send really detailed formal submissions. You can get that from maybe an Anglo community whose only language is probably English. Now, so that way with the HiVE, we were able to use those different tools and really concentrate on the community and what they really wanted. And as Sompa said, we always try to push innovation boundaries. And yeah, you learn from your mistakes as you go by.
Well, we're really inspired by the community-led approach that you guys take, but also the sensitivity and that small detail about trees. I think it talks to everything that you guys care about. I know that we had a couple of questions. Let me just hand it over to Andrew to ask a couple of questions.
Yep.
Yeah, so a couple of questions very quickly. One about your experience with Google Translate. Were there many people using Google Translate that enable people to provide feedback on the projects? Do you know any stats around that?
We do have another tool called Hotjar, and that basically is a heat mapping tool that allows us to track where people are clicking. So where we have Google Translate on the site, we can see how many people are clicking. We aren't able to see how many of those clicks translate to formal submissions, as it doesn't track, you know, from one tool to another, but people are using that tool. So we know that, you know, it's been very helpful for our diverse community.
Well, a question from Michelle Adams. What was the engagement budget for this project? Doesn't say which one. I'm guessing Parry Park, because that was quite a large one. How much time would you estimate staff spent on setting up the site?
So budget-wise, now what we did, I think it's a bit mixed answer between Somp and I, but I'll just talk a little bit about budget. So with our council, you know, we have printing services and everything, and it's a very low cost compared to going outside. But budget-wise, because most of the work was done online, and we sometimes, depending on biases and to reduce biases, we would hire external contractors to run focus groups, but most of the work was done in-house. So for Parry Park, when it came to engagement, I can't talk about the HiVE aspect, but anything to do with focus groups, flyers and pamphlets and things like that, I think we spent just under 5,000 Australian dollars. Just because we used an external contractor. If you had taken that external contractor out, it would have been less than $1,000 for us budget-wise. So Sompa, do you have anything with?
In terms of Parry Park, so timeline, we knew about the project several months in advance before it went on exhibition. And we sort of had the idea of using the outcome quiz as a fun way of getting, you know, kids more involved. We were just waiting for an opportunity to use it. When it comes to getting assets, we try to ask to be involved very early on in the project, so that we are more involved in, you know, the testing and the prototyping. We can work with the designers and say, hey, you know, we want to use this tool. Are you able to provide us with a before and after? So when we're able to brief in the designers of the play space, they're able to provide the assets for us to use. So that only can be done when you're involved early in the piece, like several months, maybe 2 months or so before it actually goes on exhibition. Yeah, so it's only possible if you are involved early.